Hello and welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to configure the AWS provider and run a Terraform init to initialize Terraform and get it ready to deploy AWS resources. So let's get started. So here I am in the AWS provider documentation within Terraform, and a provider is basically used by Terraform to interface with the API of whatever infrastructure you're trying to build. So in this case, you're trying to build AWS infrastructure, so you use the AWS provider. If you're using GCP or Azure or VMware or whatever else, you will use their respective providers. So as you can see, it's pretty straightforward. Since we've already provided credentials, we don't need to provide those within the provider block here. If you scroll down, you can see there's actually lots of ways to add these credentials, but again, we already have a profile, so all we need to do is access the shared credentials file, just like this. So let's go ahead and we'll keep it fairly simple. I'm just going to copy this here. And then within our Terraform directory here, which we created earlier, I'm going to create a new file, and let's call this providers.tf, just like so. And we'll paste that in. Now I'm actually going to remove this version block here because you may be in the distant future and not on version 3 anymore. So again, I'm going to just remove that and let you download whatever version is current. Now, after that, we need to add our provider block. That is the required providers block, and that provides configuration that Terraform needs to know about. But the provider block itself provides the information needed to access AWS specifically. So if you scroll down here, you can actually see that we have some usage examples, and we have one right here with shared credentials file already here for us. So let's go ahead and just copy this one, and I'm going to paste that right here. Now again, typically I'd type all of this out, but since this is a very quick course, I want to make sure it is as streamlined as possible for you. So here, I'm just going to remove this, and I'm just going to add that little squiggly right there to indicate the home directory, .aws/credentials, because that's where our credentials file is stored. Now, if you've moved it, of course, you'll want to change this, but this is actually the default for Windows and Mac, so you should be good to go. Now for the profile, remember that was named VS Code, and the region is US West 2. So this is what you should have here for the provider. Again, if the documentation did not provide this exactly, of course, just copy it from here. All right, so now that that's done, let's go ahead and run a Terraform init to initialize this and connect to AWS to ensure everything works out. So I'm going to click on Terminal and New Terminal, just like so. And let's go ahead and I'm going to pull this up a little bit, clear this screen, and let's go ahead and run Terraform init. All right, Terraform has been successfully initialized. As you can see, we've got HashiCorp AWS version 3.71.0, at least that's my version. If your version is different, that is perfectly fine. Also, you can see that Terraform has created a lock file, terraform lock.hcl, and what that's going to do is ensure that the version is frozen. Again, you can change this if you'd like, and this should be the current version you're using, but this is something you might want to keep in your GitHub or GitLab or wherever you're storing your code repository so that you can ensure that every time you run this code, it always uses the same version of the provider, and you have a much lower risk of having some sort of issue with an upgrade. So it looks like everything is all nice and initialized. As you can see here, I can do this drop down, and you can actually see the provider, which for Windows is an exe, and for Linux and Mac, you'll actually see another binary there. But this is compiled, and you're not going to go digging through it. So everything is ready to go now to start deploying resources. So go ahead and mark this lesson complete, come on back to the next one, and let's get deploying.